Alrighty, it is Monday, January 5th, almost January 6th. Brings back good memories, right? Um,
Lovely memories.
so, uh, over the weekend on Saturday, Donald Trump decided to implement regime change under the guise, and also trying to take control of oil under the guise of drugs coming out of Venezuela. Um, Initial thoughts, reactions to DJT becoming Venezuela first.
hmm Um, well, obviously, like we can talk about how it developed and like what went down, but I do think it's interesting because, like, is it really regime change? Like, he was sitting there saying, "And this is not regime change," and then I was like, "Nah, it's definitely regime change." Then I was thinking, "Wait, you're just letting the regime stay in power, so maybe you're right."
Well, he's
You
the
know?
one going to be running Argentina now.
Oh, of course.
So, I
Yes,
mean,
of
that is
course.
that is
Of
regime.
course, we're going to be running it, but. The more information we learn that there seems to be something going on, just kind of the rhetoric that Delcy Rodriguez is speaking about. And honestly, if I was her, I would play it smart because really all you need to do is do what he wants to do. And honestly, is that really that bad? Like, I'm not saying like obviously him and somebody not controlling your oil fields, your sovereignty, things like that. Obviously, that's bad.
Right.
But Delcy Rodriguez is probably sitting there like, as Trump said, she might have a fate worse than Maduro. Okay, so you're gonna drone strike her or something like what does that happen? If I'm Delcy, I'm like, what do you need? And honestly, also from a standpoint of what's best for Venezuela, right? You begin to kind of take into account these multiple different scenarios and realistically we obviously with what we can see like we were able to do this pretty effortlessly.
Yeah.
Now what comes next?
He kidnapped an entire president from a different country.
Yes, with very little like resistance,
Yeah.
just an ability to basically go in and like completely do that, which I do think like from like a military standpoint proves that like we still have like the capacity to do a lot.
Yeah.
um Excuse me.
We don't have health care because we spend so much on the military, but I mean, we do see why our military gets as much money as it does. Because,
Hmm.
like, I mean, you're right. Like, there were no U.S. civilian casualties or no U.S. casualties. There were
Hmm.
only Venezuelan casualties, even though Trump said that there were
Yeah.
no
And
Venezuelan,
then,
but there was over 40
yeah,
reported.
and it seems like a lot of the people that were like the security for Maduro were Cuban, like military officials and like intelligence and people like that. Um, so like there's definitely that, and some of the arguments they're like this is you know a caliphate in the Western Hemisphere. I'm sorry, Venezuela is not a caliphate. Like it can be, you can describe it with multiple different things and say multiple different things,
Right.
but those are just not realistic. Now, obviously, do I think that Iran and other actors have relationships with Venezuela? Of course. But like that's kind of what you do when you push people towards like you antagonize them. And not to say like obviously Maduro, bad guy, rules, you know, with basically no regard for human rights or anything like that. But we can also sit there and say like there are aspects where, Maduro was basically going to give you the oil. Maduro was going to work with you on certain things. Now, I think obviously he just didn't cooperate well enough. So, I think just to kind of cover it, um, the whole instance occurring, everything going down, um, it's kind of scary to say that and him be so confident, especially in the airplane yesterday in Air Force One. And then it's like, and Cuba's next, and we might come for Colombia, and then Mexico, and then
Yeah, Mexico and then
uh,
Iran.
Greenland again. We're like saying that like well in I
Yeah.
guess he said how many days, like 2 months or something like that, which is like okay, so are we gonna like we gonna are we gonna do this? And what does that mean? Do you fly into Denmark? Like, do you depose? Like, what does that realistically look like? And also, at a certain point, do you destroy every alliance you have?
I mean,
Because I mean, what do they think that everything is just going to be Venezuela? Because at a certain point, countries are going to be like, okay, and even not even just countries, like from an American standpoint, if we like, Trump's already bombed 7 countries. If we go into like Cuba and we destabilize all these other regimes, at a certain point, there's going to be blowback. There's going to be.
yeah. I mean, 100% with his rhetoric too. I mean,
Hmm.
I think that also what's insane to me is like he did this without going and getting congressional approval.
Oh,
And
of course, yeah.
I'm just like, this has the potential of starting a war. Like, you don't just kidnap a president. Like, for
Hmm.
example, if somebody were to go and abduct Donald Trump, a
Hmm.
lot of us in this country would celebrate, obviously, but we would have to go and retaliate, right? Because we can't
Hmm.
just let another country go and abduct our president. And so, like,
We can't. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Venezuela actually, it might be a good thing, but now you're right. Like he's talking about Cuba, he's talking about Mexico, and Mexico we do have a good relationship with, or we had a good relationship with
Mm.
this year, or I guess technically last year.
Yeah.
Might have kind of veered that away a little bit, but yeah, the Greenland one though, especially, I mean, it's just out of nowhere. Like at least with
Mm.
Mexico and everywhere else, it's just like, okay, well, they are destabilized. Like we need to destabilize like their current administration, or like there's drugs coming in and we need to stop. Like at least he has like a guise for that. Whereas
Covered. Yeah.
Greenland is more so just like, yeah, we need it for security purposes. In other words, we're just trying to make it a like we will overtake a country for tactical army reasons, nothing more,
Hmm.
which is just also crazy to me because I'm like, why? How do you feel this confident doing something like this? It just
Hmm.
doesn't make any
And
sense.
also, this is a country, one, Greenland doesn't even really want to be a part of Denmark. And then two,
Yeah.
this is a NATO ally and one of our strongest allies who has supported us in a lot of ways that even other European powers haven't and other NATO allies haven't. With like Iraq and other instances of us getting support from them. I mean, they literally spied on their neighbors for us.
Yeah.
Um, and we treat them like this. And as much as, there are security arguments, but if you're allied with somebody and you already have a base in Greenland, why don't you just talk to them? Why do you have to control them
Right.
to work with them?
Right.
But I think it kind of fits within this Dunroe doctrine. I guess that we were saying. But I mean, in a lot of ways, it does, right? Like this is our hemisphere now, and we kind of control it. And I think I was reading, it was like a report from like Fiona Hill, who was like about her and like some conversations. And this was like back in 2019. But basically, in this, it was talking about that there was like a Venezuela for Ukraine type deal or like argument from Russia. And
Mm.
it kind of does make sense and align with everybody could get what they want, really, in this scenario.
Right.
China gets Taiwan. We just completely give up on that, let them t do what they want there. Russia, they get Ukraine, which in a lot of ways, ending the war and doing what you're doing right now and, basically parroting Russian propaganda and, going back and forth, obviously, depending on like the sentiments. But it does to me kind of like make sense in alignment because China and Russia are not going to stick their neck out for Venezuela. Like they'll say some things that like obviously you have to say and like because of alliances, because of how politics works. But they're not going to send troops. They're not going to go to war over it. And
Right.
honestly, for Russia, it kind of aligns with like you do what you want in your area, and I do what I want in mine. Like,
Yeah, and I think that's why that's what kind of scares me because like what
hmm
happens when the Ukraine war does end, right? Like then
hmm
all of a sudden Trump can go and focus all of his military power and all of the military spending because like we are still sending aid in some capacity in terms of like weapons to Ukraine, right? What happens when he fully pulls that back or that's completely done? Like, do we just hyper focus on our surrounding areas? Do we like
hmm
who is next? Would Cuba be next? Would Mexico be next? I don't know if he would do any of this before the 2026 election, just because it would be a bloodbath if he continued
hmm
to push, especially a border country like Mexico. Like
That
realistic,
doesn't make Mexico doesn't almost really even make any sense to me. Like, okay, like the only thing that I could see possibly happening is drone strikes, which is awful in itself. But do I think he's gonna fly in and take out Scheinbaum? No, I don't. Like
at,
one,
at least you
the
don't think
American
so,
people
but
in
we.
general would be like Mexico. Come
I
on.
wouldn't.
Like I know people like to like deal with Mexico, but at the end of the day, like I'm not scared of Mexico. I don't like, oh my God, the Mexican government. Like I think we should actually probably treat them a little bit better and work with them in better ways than we do. Um,
I agree. I agree. But like I said, this president is so erratic. You never know,
yeah,
right? Like she could say something that upsets Trump, and then all of a sudden he's flying in with
yeah,
Marine Force One saying like, "Hey, guess who the new president of
mhm,
Mexico is? We got
yeah.
Marco Rubio over Venezuela and now Mexico." So
Mhm.
I
And
mean,
it's
you just
speaking
don't know.
of that, I mean, sidelining people is very interesting. I mean, Machado was basically kind of saying, like, because I got this peace prize, like, Trump's fighting for, like, peace and he's fighting for, like, the Venezuelan people and all this type stuff, yada, yada, yada. And it's just interesting how, and, I have mixed feelings about Machado, but, like, I do think that the opposition in Venezuela and stuff like that, that there are a lot of things that you can admire that they've done. Just because, like, I do view Maduro as a very, very corrupt and cruel dictator. And might I add that almost every single country in South America also views him as that, right? Like it doesn't matter if it's like a leftist government, it doesn't matter if it's like more right wing, like he is a dictator. That
Nobody
is what these countries.
nobody's going to shed
Yeah,
tears over Maduro being
no,
right? Like
but
we can agree with that. He is a
yeah,
terrible person. Nobody's saying that he's
hmm
a person. We're just saying if you're going to go and do regime change, especially in a sense like this, like
hmm
you didn't do it legally. You didn't go through congressional.
no,
There was there's seemingly no plan into to enforce some kind of regime change. It just sounds like Donald Trump
hmm
wants to take over the country and now handle all of their oil production, right? Like
yeah,
he doesn't have a plan. He's like we're gonna run Venezuela for right now. That
yeah.
doesn't plan.
I think the goal is to reorient Venezuela.
Yeah,
It's no longer going to be a China ally. It's no longer going to be a Russia ally. It is going to be what it used to be. Or one like it, obviously you can't just recreate it, but Venezuela used to be like probably our closest ally within the region.
right.
So you kind of retransition them into being like, well, beyond like an ally, a vassal state, right?
Right.
It's a puppet regime. And there's no other way to describe it as that because if, he was even saying Trump was so funny with it. Don't ask me who's in charge. I'll have to say what like something that's not popular. You say it anyways.
Yeah.
You're in charge.
Yeah.
Or Rubio, I guess. But I
Rubio's the president for sure.
absolutely. But I think everybody in this administration, and I've talked about it before, they got their little, I guess, their little gift
Yeah.
in exchange for loyalty,
Right.
right? Rubio gets to do what he wants on certain aspects, and like he seems to be very much leading the kind of approach to Venezuela, the approach to Cuba, and knowing who he is, his background, the Florida-ness of it. it makes sense why he is acting these ways and he has these views. But I do also think that it's funny for specifically other people in this administration, like Tulsi Gabbard, who tweets were wonderful and great to look back on. And even comments she made earlier this year about regime change is so hilarious to me because, this is somebody who has been one of the main persons who said like she wanted Assad to stay in power,
Yep.
right? Like she thinks that specifically with Islamists, right, is her favorite thing. But it's interesting because in 2019 she was calling out Trump saying that Bolton and him just want it for the oil and like all this type stuff and conversation around that. And multiple different times has talked about it and said this is ridiculous. And what does she tweet out the day before? Aloha, peace, and filled with gratitude.
Do you
Really?
think she knew?
Yes, I think she do. Absolutely. But I'm okay. I'm fine. Peace. I'm filled with gratitude and happiness. Aloha. Like and
She
then no common sense. And the issue is why is no common sense? Because
she's been radio
you
silent.
don't you don't it begins to expose who like people's real intents. Like some people I think they're principled, they might have their own like ideologies and like arguments, but at the end of the day, they're consistent that they'll believe what they believe and they're not going to just switch around on it. Now, you can count on, maybe your hand the number of politicians who are able to do that. Unfortunately, it's very slim. But to the lengths at which the Trump people have done is just next level.
It's insane. Like there's just been it's been so inconsistent and like
Yeah.
it you just don't know with these people, right? Like
Mhm.
even with the FCC chair, right? Like he originally was like a huge proponent of like free speech and saying like we should be able to
Mhm.
criticize presidents and not have to fear retribution. And then all of a sudden, last year it was suddenly Jimmy Kimmel needs to apologize or Disney needs to take action or else there's going to be, issues and licenses pulled.
Mhm.
Like it's just the inconsistencies within this administration has been insane. I think
Mhm.
the only consistency that we've truly seen is with Pete Hegseth because Pete has always been a little bit of a Hitler fanatic. And so nothing has changed in terms of his. Now, granted, he's he's dumb, don't get me wrong about that, but I feel like he's been historically consistent with everything that he's been saying. He's just been anti-immigrant, anti-women, anti anything that isn't straight white male. That's it.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously like each of them gets to enact their own little agendas and their own little arguments and things like that and their own reasons for being in there, but uh, you know kind of taking it back and like seeing that it's like there's real consequences for your lack of one pushing back on the president when he says dumb and insane things because it is insane, and especially when Katie Miller is out there sitting there posting Greenland with the American flag over it and saying that soon. I mean, do you not realize that you're like you are a tyrant? You are just because it's America and America is the greatest country on earth and all these different things doesn't mean that it's any different
Yeah.
than what Russia or China or other countries participate in. And like I say this as somebody who does believe that America has made, like better decisions on some regards. Not all of them, obviously. But like I do think there is like more grounding for human rights and things like that within our country. Now, do we ignore it half the time? Yeah, absolutely. But, at least we talk about it. Um, it's like a conversation we have and we're like, yeah, we probably should do that. We'll get there eventually.
First step of
But
your issue, first step of recovery is to admit that you have an issue.
yeah, which apparently we can't take into consideration that our issue with regime change and constantly thinking that this time's going to be different. I swear this time's going to be different.
Yeah.
You know, again and again and again, we conduct these regime change or nation building, even if we say it's not, that is absolutely what you're doing.
Right.
especially when you're saying we're gonna take out oil and we're gonna give money back. And he was talking about the infrastructure being damaged there and how we're gonna invest the money and build, I guess build back Venezuela better or something like that. And it's just kind of
I
it's funny
love,
to me because like where's the Infrastructure Act for America? Like where's the
yeah,
health care for Americans? Where is anything that actually delivers for Americans?
yeah,
And clearly Congress doesn't exist anymore. Like there's nothing that you're getting passed, right? Unless it's an executive order coming down or something like that,
which
there's nothing happening.
none of these are long-term resolutions, right? Because the
No.
next Democratic president can easily go and rescind all of these executive orders, override these executive orders, right?
Hmm.
Like it's just, that's what frustrates me more than anything is like this president isn't doing anything for the long term. He did this in his first administration too, when it came to the
Hmm.
Abraham Accords, right? Like, he went and found majority Muslim countries and created a peace
Hmm.
agreement from countries that weren't even feuding and then completely left out uh, Hamas, and which is why tensions ended up boiling over, and eventually, October 7th or whatever, 10th or whatever happened,
Hmm.
whatever date it was, happened in Israel, and then he blames Biden for mistakes that he went,
Hmm.
like I said, he kicked the can down the road, and it's the same thing that's
Hmm.
happening right now. It's just like it's executive order after executive order after executive order. The only thing that he's truly passed is the big beautiful bill, and like
Hmm.
that ended up screwing middle America. And now all of a sudden all of these healthcare premiums are starting to skyrocket because
Hmm.
these ACA subsidies have been completely scrapped. And so like I don't know. It's very frustrating to see him go and continuously go and pass executive order after executive order without
Hmm.
going through Congress and like doing what needs to be done, finding common ground, and then actually passing like meaningful bills that would actually help the American people. He's just passing the buck down the road. Again, that
Yeah.
is who Donald Trump is. He likes to pass things on and then not ever get a resolution. And he is so good at passing the buck to somebody else, especially whenever like things are his fault. It's Joe Biden's fault, right? Like, we'll talk about something that's terrible that happened within the past couple of months. He's like,
Hmm.
oh, this was from the Biden administration. Like,
Hmm.
even though when the good things happen, he's taking credit for that. But then when the bad things
Hmm.
happen, it's just like, okay, this is somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that they continue to kind of embrace the reverse Biden rhetoric, right? Everything's great, everything's fine, the economy's doing wonderful, all these different things. And not to say like I think in a lot of regards, like say what you want about Biden, but the more and more I experience of this administration, I just kind of like look at people and I'm like, I mean, this is what you wanted. Like, you're so scared and worried that Joe Biden's so old or he's going to die or something like that. And it's like, your concerns should be that we're going to start World War III.
Yeah.
And I know you were so worried that Kamala was going to send your boys to Ukraine, but I guess we're going to Venezuela and I
Right.
guess we're going to Cuba, which, you know, is traditional. But, at a certain point, you got to realize that who the real warmongers are.
Yeah.
It's the people who sit there and tell you that they're the pro peace candidate who get the FIFA Peace Award and then are talking about the day before they're about to bomb a country. I just want world peace. Well, you got to work harder on that part. You really do. You can't just bomb people and, depose their governments and say, we just really want peace. We want peace. I bombed 7 countries, but peace, please. Like it's kind of counterintuitive.
It is. It 100% is. It's just like, and like, don't even get me started about the FIFA Peace Award. Like they created an entire
Yeah.
I it was clearly because they didn't want to upset Donald Trump, especially with, FIFA coming to the United
Hmm.
States. It's like obviously they need to make sure that they're in good
Hmm.
standing with him. And so
Yeah.
giving him an
And
award was exactly, I mean, that was perfect. That
mhm.
was that was thinking ahead. And the president of FIFA,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that that was like a bad move on his part. I thought it was a brilliant move because, like I said, the
Hmm.
one thing that Donald Trump loves is attention and awards.
Hmm.
And like him getting like creating this ballroom or putting his name on the Kennedy Center or now getting
Yeah.
the first ever FIFA and wanting the Nobel Peace Prize or now like getting the first ever FIFA Peace Prize. It's just like he clearly he wanted it. He showed up
Hmm.
to the celebration for himself. He accepted the award. He
Hmm.
bragged about it. He talked about it. That's exactly like that was the FIFA president knew what he was doing. He knew
Yeah.
what he needed to do in order to get on Trump's good side. He did it perfectly to a T. So I do not have an issue with what he did. I thought it was smart.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been multiple instances where it's like normally I would have been like, oh, this person is literally groveling. And with some of them I still think it was. Like I think in Fantano or whatever and Trump, they have like a relate they like before this even instance happened, they have some sort of personal friendship or relationship anyways, which
Like,
is par for the course with Trump in general about like the people that he works with and like cooperates with, right? Like
like,
business dealings and all these different things. Clearly, he's protecting his friends and buddies in multiple different ways. Um, but yeah, I think back to like, like kind of the way Machado d dedicated her award to Trump and said, like he's been working on these things and stuff like that. And then what happens? He gets stabbed in the back, basically. They're not working with opposition. And while politically it makes sense why they might not necessarily embrace the opposition just because of like one, they don't really actually have control over the country. Like we've tried this before, it didn't really work. But in a lot of ways, I think, you know, you saw Zelensky arguing like, okay, if you can depose dictators, like, what's the double standard? And in some ways, there's some truth to that. Like, why we pick and choose certain countries where it's like, okay, we need to do an action here. Like, we have to do something significant. Whereas like other countries, it's like, man, keep dying, keep suffering. Like, we don't care.
yeah,
And like, obviously, I think that comes into play with like the hemispheres and like, as much as people don't like act like it's different, like Venezuela and South America directly impacts our politics and especially like migration and other issues like that. Um, it's we're very connected to them, even though we don't think we are, right? I think a lot of times in America we tend to like think of ourselves more aligned and like kind of tied with like Europe and like those countries, but it's like throughout a lot of our history and kind of realistically like just like culturally and a lot of other things, like I do think that the Americas in general are one, we have consistently been the dominant power in the region for decades now.
right,
And, there's this whole competition between us and China within the region, but also, you know, the way what happens in America tends to happen in South America and even the world, like reverberations, right? I mean, you see um, the crisis in Venezuela already pushed out millions of Venezuelans to, Chile and Argentina and all these other countries who you've seen a lot of them turn aggressively rightward, right? Like, I
yes,
mean, Chile elected a son of a Nazi party, somebody like,
no,
there's a lot of Trump endorsed candidates have won. Honduras, I believe, was another one. Um, you have, it was interesting actually, like Bukele was coming out and like, oh, so you support thugs, like, talking about Maduro. And it's like, okay, so the next administration comes out and they're like, we're going to invade El Salvador and we're going to take Bukele because one, he's an awful person too.
right,
Um, and is that justified? Is that okay? Because you said that that's fine for Venezuela, so why not you?
right.
Like it just begins to kind of like worry, like, where do we go from here? And at what point do, you know, you playing it and saying like, okay, um, certain alliances in certain regions and governments, right? Like if we ally more with like the right-leaning governments and things like that, like there will be a lot less pushback on some of our actions in those regions.
Right.
Now, obviously, I think some, you have Brazil, you have Mexico, you have Uruguay and Colombia and other countries who are kind of pushing back on against some of this. But you know, it's sad that we end up embracing militarization and that approach rather than doing what really Latin America wants from us, right? Like they would prefer us to actually approach them as equals and partners and work with them because like there is like this kind of cross-American bond between all these countries and it's like if you would just pay attention a little bit to their issues and work with them instead of like always treating them as like a problem for you to fly in and solve or just a place to completely ignore,
Yeah.
there could be like some real head, gains because like despite all of the concerns about American power in the region and like American influence and like kind of like destabilizing countries and things like that as well, I do think there is a pathway for a better relationship. And maybe we can get to a path where Venezuela is heading specifically, but also the region as well is heading towards a better solution. Now, do I think that's what's going to happen? No. But I do see it as there is the possibility where this kind of just it doesn't morph into anything else. There's no more actions. It just kind of becomes a regime that is like kowtowing to Trump and does what he wants to do, even if they might not support that rhetoric at home.
Right.
So, just seeing how this unfolds, and only time will tell really with this.
I agree. Like I said, like you said though, like I think it's going to be interesting to see how the next few years do kind of pan out because like he is talking about Colombia and Mexico right now, but like
Mhm.
Brazil is part of BRICS, and like Donald Trump has
Yeah.
vocalized his opposition to BRICS in a major
Hmm.
way. Like, could we see
Yeah.
some kind of intervention like with that? And then what happens if we do get involved with Brazil, with
Hmm.
Russia and China react? Because like, I mean, it would be kind of a similar
Hmm.
situation with Ukraine and Russia, right? Like where
Hmm.
Russia's been attacking Ukraine, and then they're going to have to
Yeah.
concede certain things. Like, what would be the end goal? But there's just a lot to kind of digest
Yeah.
with this whole situation. But I know that we're running out of time, so I wanted to, before we end the call, spend like about 10 minutes on the Tim Walz situation.
Hmm.
Um, Tim Walz is officially dropped out from re-election for a third term as governor of Minnesota. This happened not more than an hour ago. Initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it's not necessarily a surprise. Like, I guess maybe I hadn't like fully tracked it in the same way, but like like we were talking about a little bit before the call, like um I've just heard like it kind of getting a little bit of traction and also, seeing posts on Twitter as well from, people going to the daycares and things like that. And like while I think that controversy in itself is emblematic of like a lot of the conversation around and rhetoric around Somalis and things like that,
Yeah.
there's also obviously, like they're blaming Tim Walz and saying it's his fault and all those things, which, you know, look, there was obviously fraud there, not gonna lie about that, but I think there needs to be an investigative process and, there needs to be some sort of answers for those things. But to automatically blame Tim Walz and say it's his fault, and then, also the way in which the rhetoric towards the Somali community showing up at a daycare, you know, a lot of the actions that people have been taking in those regions, I think, are just extremely far. But it goes to show you that there's traction on it, not just in, I think, those right-leaning spaces, but even your kind of more normie-ish, spaces. There's like some response to that.
Yeah.
So it kind of lines up and makes sense. We also kind of talked about like it's not just him that's gotten a lot of heat. They've attacked his son, they've attacked his daughter in some ways, talk about his family, talk about him in general. They love to talk about tampon Tim, make AI videos about him.
Yeah.
Um, Trump accused him of possibly killing Melissa Hortman, which, he's
Which it's insane. Like the fact that Trump amplified that, saying like
mhm.
because she voted for an immigration bill, like that's just it's baffling to me. Like that is putting Tim Walz
Mhm.
and his entire family. I mean, that would be even more
Yeah,
calm,
but Donald Trump doesn't care. Like, I don't know. I think it's like at a certain point, like people should just realize that Donald Trump will not care when you die. He doesn't care. If
right?
the post from Robert Reiner like doesn't show you who he really is, nothing will. And I'm sorry, everybody defends him, defends him, defends him. You get mad when people talk about Charlie Kirk and like say things bad about him, and you're so up in arms, but you could not care less if it's somebody that you don't care about. You can't. You can't muster the effort to care. Now, I do think that people are starting to like when Marjorie Taylor Greene and other people are saying, I kind of feel shitty. Like, I feel like I'm not doing something right with this. And they start to change. I think normal people who aren't just raging narcissists can start to say, maybe I shouldn't post these things. Maybe I shouldn't say these things, especially when I'm the president of the United States. And I'm so worried about the rhetoric that people use against me. You could use your brain to say, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that like Donald Trump as he's gotten older has gotten worse, which is crazy
For
to
sure.
say because like in 2016 he was already bad. And I thought that like I remember 2016 to 2020 it was just like this man was mocking all of his political opponents. Like I said, we always talk about the names, the tampon Tims,
Yeah.
the what's it called? Marjorie Trader Greens, the Sleepy Joes, the Ron DeSanctimoniouses. Like he's always
Mhm.
mocked people, but like it seems like he's progressively getting worse now. And like
Mhm.
he's he's diving more into conspiracy theories, which kind of
Yeah.
screwed
Well, I
him
mean,
is kind of well, more so than usual. Like I feel like in 2016 to 2020, it was like he was into conspiracy theories, but it wasn't like
mhm.
overtly bad like it is nowadays. But like, because like, I mean, even for this past election cycle, right? He was talking about the Haitians eating dogs and cats, like that was literally insane. But then like I feel like some of these conspiracy theories are going to come
Mhm.
back and haunt him or bite him, right? Like, because like we saw that with the Epstein files. He was one of the biggest proponents of like releasing the Epstein files as soon as he's president of the United
Mhm.
States. And now it's the Epstein files are a hoax. They're a Democratic
Mhm.
hoax. Or they don't exist. Or now that they're releasing them, it's like redacted and there's like going to be like a huge issue with that. And like, I don't know. It seems like Donald Trump has gotten worse and that's hard to believe because he was already like a terrible person. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of the things that he's doing is in part to kind of distract from the Epstein thing, right? Like even with this Venezuelan attack, right? Like he, talking about now attacking Cuba and Mexico and possibly Greenland. Like these are just like things that a normal president wouldn't vocalize or a normal president wouldn't do, right? Like Donald Trump now, I actually saw something. Let me see if I can find it again. It was like Donald Trump attacked what, 8 different countries this year? Okay, yes. Trump becomes the first president to bomb 8 countries in one year. Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Palestine, Somalia, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. So, I mean, this is the peace president that we're talking about.
We did something in Palestine.
I believe so, yeah.
I remember that. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I know there's like, some of the things we do barely get any coverage, really. Like the Nigeria strikes, like barely got any coverage. And like,
Yeah, because
look, like
Christians, yeah, yeah.
I definitely think like there's different, that's a whole conversation to be had with like some stuff. Like I think there's, you know, uh, not every action I think that you conduct militarily is, awful. Like I'm maybe that's bad to say, but I do think like there is some truth to that. Like if you're working with the government, like if you're working with the Nigerian government and you're bombing on their behalf, I'm gonna be honest, like some of that's a little shaky. Now, do I think it makes the most sense or it's the most strategic? No. But, you know, with that being said, I think the rate at which that you do these things and you know, most people don't want to fight 8 wars at one time or like 8 different conflicts or even like did bombings resolve the issues? And I think in most of these instances, no, because I saw something recently about Nigeria, right? Like there was still stuff going on with that.
Yeah.
Like none of these things, none of one, nothing he does is actually goes to a resolution, right? And just to kind of tie it back to like the Tim Walz things, it's like it's one thing if you're like, let's talk about, fraud or let's talk about like these issues. But even when Trump mentions issues, there's no real desire to solve them.
Yeah.
I think it's just more of like noise and distraction, as you were saying. Like
Right.
he doesn't always intend to do something about these different situations, but if you tweet it out, you get your little followers and all these, Republican figures and things like that to investigate the things that you want to, or talk about the Tim Walz being like corrupt or like scared of the Somalis or for some reason.
Yeah.
There's always some sort of like gain to be had in kind of the narrative and what's going on. And then you're able to like one, you're able to distract people because there's so many different things going on that people don't have the capacity, especially when, you know, the Venezuela thing is probably one of the largest things that you have where it's a big distraction. Like you cannot like it's all over the news. It's all over like Twitter. Like that is something that gets a lot of coverage and like I've barely really heard about Epstein in general now, right?
Yeah.
Like
Which is
it
crazy.
yeah, but I mean
Something
it
that the
also
Republicans have been on for years.
Mhm. Yeah.
Years. I mean, some people made it their entire identity.
Yeah.
Kozovics, like he got famous because of the whole,
Mhm.
Pizzagate situation.
Yeah. But is what is their real identity? Like is it those issues or is it like I don't think a lot of these influence like that's what they are. Like these Republican right-wing influencers, far-right influencers, whatever they are. Like I think specifically honestly in some ways like this is gonna sound bad. Some of these people I feel like are worse than Nick Fuentes, and not in the rhetoric that they have, but in the way that like Nick Fuentes like sits there and like it's a whole Nazi stream, right?
Right.
But it's like a coherent Nazi stream that's like sometimes he's even like that doesn't make sense, right? Whereas like these other people will go down any rabbit hole, anything that makes sense or anything that they want to expose or make sense in their mind. But the thing is, next week they could be talking about something completely different, right?
Yeah.
Like at least Nick Fuentes is a consistent awful person, right? Other people, there is no rhyme or reason. Like it's like one week you're pro regime change, the next week you're saying it's bad. It's all based on one person, right? Like it's not them either. It's like it's so much about like Trump or like Trumpian type approaches towards things, right? Or justifying his logic that doesn't even really exist, right? Like it's and
We're backwards for him. It's insane.
yeah, and they don't even believe half of the things they said.
I know.
Or maybe they do. Maybe I'm so convinced that some of these people haven't just jumped off the deep end and they're just they do truly believe. And I think that there is a level of which that there is some people who have begun to like completely feel a lot of the things that he says, even if it feels conspiratorial, like
I
everything's a conspiracy now. So
I don't know. It's because like I look at someone like a Tucker Carlson and what we saw in the Dominion lawsuits where,
mhm,
it was brought up that he didn't believe anything regarding the election fraud that Donald Trump was saying and thought that it was
mhm,
crazy. Or Sean Hannity,
yeah,
they continue to peddle those conspiracy theories when they're on camera because like they
mhm,
know what generates the ratings. They know who they
yeah,
need to actually be in good tidings with. And so like I don't know. It's kind of insane because like I think that they
mhm,
do know. They understand where their position is and who their audience is.
mhm,
And their audience is these Republicans that believe in these insane conspiracy theories. I've been talking to
yeah,
some of my friends about like the whole Charlie Kirk situation and like regarding Charlie Kirk, a lot of them believe what Candace Owens has been saying, which is that Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel. That's insane to me, right? But
oh,
like
was it was Israel and the Egyptian plains and like if you actually listen to that, none of that makes sense
I know.
from a standpoint of a rational person. And I'm not talking about the politics of it. I'm talking about the truth of it. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense. None of these things make any sense. And that is a very complicated tangent like long story about like I couldn't even follow it. I was like, okay, there's these planes and they're doing this and that and you know all these different things. And it's interesting to me that at the same time that they think Israel's doing those things, right? But who supports Israel? Who backs Israel to whatever they do to the mat almost?
right.
Like it's so ridiculous to me to sit there and be like, yeah, like we don't trust Israel and all that type of stuff. And it's like, okay, me neither, but your guy seems to. But
Right.
I also think there's a reason why certain people, just gonna say it, there's a reason why certain people feel the way they do about Israel. And I'm not talking about what's happening in Gaza and their treatment of Palestinians. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about it is the Jewishness. It is the Jewish state aspect. Now, does that mean that there aren't like look, there's a degree of which I can say, yes, Israel has done things. You know, Mossad and other issues, like they've done things that are definitely questionable and, you know, I think influence campaigns and things like that. But it doesn't mean that they control the world or, you know, all these anti-Semitic theories. But at the same time, you know, we kind of like hinted on in some other episodes, but, you know, people are starting to kind of embrace that rhetoric
Yeah.
regardless of where they align. And then they're saying things, you know, like certain Jews or certain, you know, people like that. And it's like, uh, it almost seems like we're just going to become like a circular firing squad in different ways, right? Like whatever new conspiracy theory comes out or whatever new group like we have that we're just going to follow the rhetoric and just deal with like all these conspiracies and you know there's not going to be really any resolution to those things because like I mean do you just stop believing those theories at a certain point or do you hop onto the next conspiracy theory and say, you know, maybe I was wrong about that. So let me hop down the like the frogs are making, you know, making people gay or whatever the hell the next thing is, right? Like speaking of, I mean, this stuff is too far for Alex Jones. Like, like even Alex Jones is kind of like, I don't know, this is kind of crazy. And when you like, when he thinks it's gone off the deep end,
Where are you? Yeah. Like
yeah,
you're
exactly.
you're not even in reality anymore. Well,
No.
um, yeah. Well, I appreciate the conversation as always, Chase. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, a lot of stuff happened this weekend, or today too. Technically, Tim Walz today, Venezuela on
Mhm.
Saturday. Uh, we'll obviously keep you guys up to date on everything that's been happening over the next, week or so. In case anything new happens, we'll make sure to post about it. But we appreciate you as always. Like and subscribe, and I will talk to you later, my friend.
Talk to you later.